History is filled with conflicting sources, forgotten details, and stories passed down through generations. Here at Legendary Auras, we piece together the surviving fragments to reveal the story. Welcome back. How could a child born far from palaces end up sitting on the throne of Egypt? In the vast steppes of the Kipchaks, where the winds show no mercy and tribes live between the sword and nomadic wandering, a child was born whose name no one could have imagined would shake the pillars of the Islamic world. His name was Baibars. Born in the 7th century AH, in a land north of the Black Sea, he entered a turbulent world where tribes and great powers clashed. But his childhood was short-lived. War tore people from their homelands, and captivity turned free men into commodities, sold in markets. Baibars soon found himself far from his home and people, uprooted from his first life to begin a journey he never chose. Sold in the slave market, he passed from one hand to another, a child without a homeland, without a tribe to protect him, and without a future he could foresee. Destiny held something else in store. In the world he reached, a Mamluk was not merely a slave. A Mamluk possessing strength, discipline, and intelligence could rise through the ranks of the army. There, in Egypt, his true life began. He never knew that the chains binding his childhood would one day lead him to a place reached by only a few. In Egypt, glory was never granted. You had to seize it. Baibars entered the world of the Mamluks, where training was ruthless, discipline unforgiving, and a single mistake meant death. He mastered horsemanship, perfected the use of weaponry, and learned that battles are not always won by the strongest, but by the one who knows when to strike, when to wait, and when to make the enemy believe victory is theirs just before they fall. As the years passed, his name began to shine among the Mamluks. He was no mere fighter, but a charismatic, daring leader, capable of reading the battlefield. Then came the day that transformed the region's history. In the east, the horde had swept through great cities. Baghdad fell, the Abbasid Caliphate collapsed, and their power seemed unstoppable. But in Egypt, the Mamluks prepared for a stand. In the year 1260 AD, the two armies met at Ain Jalut. There, among the hills of Palestine, the fight was for the very future of the region. Baibars led the vanguard with brilliance, weaving the trap under Sultan Qutuz. After victory, Sultan Qutuz was assassinated in a power struggle where Baibars played a central role. He became the leader. Baibars returned to Cairo, but the man who entered was not the one who had set out for Ain Jalut. In the year 1260 AD, Baibars became the Sultan of Egypt and the Levant, firmly seizing the reins of power. Before him lay a grand throne, but it was far from secure. Adversaries surrounded him. The Mongols in the east awaited a chance to strike back. Crusader fortresses clung to the Syrian coast, and internally, the state needed complete restructuring. A less resolute sultan might have settled for defending his throne, but Baibars chose offense. From day one, he began building a sultanate that would not wait for its enemies. His army marched through the Levant, striking rival strongholds, engaging the Mongols, and besieging Crusader forts, taking strategic cities one after another. He integrated warfare into his statecraft. Yet Baibars was not merely a sword. He knew that a ruler relying solely on force might win battles but lose the state. Thus, he built something greater: a formidable army, an organized administration, and an expansive network of alliances stretching beyond his borders. Egypt and the Levant became a new center of power. From the east, the Mongols still loomed on the frontiers of the Mamluk realm, while from the west and north, Crusader enclaves waited for an opening. Baibars was not a man to wait. He launched successive campaigns across the Levant, applying relentless pressure on Crusader principalities and targeting fortresses that threatened Islamic lands. Simultaneously, he kept a watchful eye on the Mongols, who remained capable of devastating raids. His reign was an era of continuous war, yet behind the clash of steel worked an untiring political mind. Baibars forged alliances with diverse powers and exploited rivalries among his foes, knowing that wars are not always decided by the sword alone. Recognizing that a sultan's legitimacy requires more than military victories, he elevated Cairo's prestige. Under his rule, the Abbasid Caliphate was re-established in Cairo after the fall of Baghdad, granting vital symbolic authority. Baibars was no longer just a general winning engagements. He was forging an empire. Over the years, his name became synonymous with dread among his enemies and strength among his followers. Baibars understood that the sword clears the path, but governance keeps the state standing. Thus, he did not limit himself to military campaigns. He reorganized the army, fortified defenses, improved communication between provinces, and established a rapid postal network across a vast realm spanning Egypt and the Levant. In Cairo and Damascus, the Mamluks were no longer merely a rising military force. They had become a structured empire with institutions, a standing army, efficient governance, and political authority. Meanwhile, campaigns continued unabated. Baibars struck his adversaries before they could regroup. His victories redrawing the map and establishing Cairo as one of the paramount centers of power in the East. Yet, behind the image of the invincible Sultan was a man aware that every victory carried new perils. Danger often breeds within palace walls. As time wore on, the body of the warrior Sultan began to bear the weight of relentless warfare. Yet he was not a man to retreat, until a day arrived when even the grandest Sultan could not prevail against his final adversary. In the year 1277 AD, Baibars reached the end of his journey. The man who began life as a child far from home, sold as a slave, fought in the ranks, stood at Ain Jalut against the Mongols, and ascended the throne of Egypt and the Levant, was about to leave it all behind. Baibars passed away in Damascus after years filled with rule and conquest. Thus ended the life of a man whose fate no one could have predicted when he was an unknown child, yet whose name became one of the most legendary sultans in history. But his death was not the end of his story. The foundations he strengthened endured, the army he forged remained a formidable power, and the sultanate he consolidated anchored the region for centuries. As for Baibars himself, his name remains suspended between history and legend. A man who started as a captive, became a Mamluk, rose as a commander, and ruled as a sultan. He rose from the absolute bottom through the sword, political genius, and sheer willpower. When the name Al-Zahir Baibars is spoken, it recalls a man who proved that history crafts its greatest kings from those believed to have no future.